There is a word that modern civilization has spent decades trying to define. Researchers have written thousands of papers about it. Governments have built entire social policy frameworks around it. Corporations pay consultants millions of dollars annually to artificially manufacture it inside their organizations. Therapists identify its absence as one of the primary drivers of the mental health crisis reshaping the industrialized world. The word is community. And despite everything, the research, the frameworks, the consultants, the therapy, the modern world has never fully figured out how to build one that actually works. But somewhere in the forests of the Democratic Republic of Congo, a group of people cracked this problem so completely, so elegantly, and so durably, that anthropologists who spent years living among them came back changed. Not academically changed. Personally changed. Researchers who arrived with clipboards and hypotheses left with something they struggled to articulate in the language of their discipline. They had witnessed something that their entire civilization was quietly starving for. The BaMbuti pygmies of the Ituri forest, one of the oldest continuous human communities on Earth, do not have a word for loneliness. Not because they lack the linguistic sophistication to describe it, but because the condition itself is so structurally foreign to the way their community is organized that the concept has never required a name. Think about what that means. In a world where loneliness has been declared a public health epidemic by the World Health Organization, where studies consistently show that chronic loneliness carries health risks comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, there exists a community that has functioned for thousands of years without producing the conditions that create it. They didn't solve loneliness with an app. They didn't solve it with a policy. They didn't solve it with a community center or a social program or a government initiative. They solved it by building an entirely different understanding of what a human being is in relation to the people around them. And once you understand how, you will never look at your own life, your own relationships, or your own community the same way again. To understand how the BaMbuti changed the way we think about community, you first need to understand what community actually requires. Not what we assume it requires. Not what modern social architecture has built itself around. But what the deepest research into human social behavior consistently identifies as the non-negotiable foundations of genuine human connection. And then you need to understand how completely, how almost casually, the BaMbuti satisfy every single one of them. Modern community building theory identifies three foundational requirements for genuine social cohesion. First, shared physical space used collectively and consistently. Second, interdependence, the condition where individuals genuinely need each other for survival and flourishing, not just for convenience. Third, equitable contribution, the sense that every member of the group gives and receives in proportions that feel fundamentally fair. These three conditions, when present simultaneously and consistently, produce what researchers call social trust, the invisible architecture that holds communities together across time, across conflict, and across the inevitable pressures that fragment groups built on weaker foundations. The BaMbuti don't study this framework. They don't implement it. They simply live it, with a completeness and a consistency that three-generation longitudinal studies of Western communities have never documented. The Ituri forest itself is the first key. The BaMbuti are forest people in a sense that goes far beyond geography. The forest is not their home the way a house is a home. It is, in their own understanding, in their own language, in the deepest structure of their worldview, a parent. They call it Apa, father, or Iba, mother, depending on context. It feeds them, shelters them, protects them, and in their belief system, loves them in return for the love and respect they give it. This relationship with the forest does exactly what the most sophisticated urban planners spend careers trying to artificially recreate. It creates a shared identity so fundamental, so non-negotiable, and so daily experienced, that individual identity within the community is always understood as part of something larger rather than in competition with it. The second key is the camp structure itself. BaMbuti camps are small, typically between 15 and 60 people, and circular. The circularity is not aesthetic. It is functional. In a circular camp, every dwelling faces the communal center. Every fire, every conversation, every moment of daily life happens within sight and sound of every other member of the community. There are no back rooms. There are no private corridors. There is no architectural space designed for separation. The physical structure of the camp makes isolation geometrically impossible. And in that geometric impossibility, something extraordinary happens to human psychology. When separation is not an available option, the energy that individuals in modern communities spend managing, negotiating, and protecting their separateness, that energy becomes available for something else entirely. For presence. But here is where the story takes a turn that no community-building consultant has ever put in a corporate presentation. Because the BaMbuti way of building community is not just different from the modern model. In several measurable, documented, and deeply uncomfortable ways, it exposes the modern model as structurally incapable of producing what it promises. And the mechanism of that exposure is not philosophical. It is practical. Consider conflict. Every community, no matter how cohesive, no matter how well designed, no matter how genuinely connected, produces conflict. This is not a failure of community. It is a feature of proximity. When human beings live in genuine relationship with each other, friction is not occasional. It is constant. The question is never whether conflict will arise. The question is what the community does with it when it does. Modern communities have built an entire infrastructure around conflict avoidance. Privacy walls, legal systems, mediation services, HR departments, noise ordinances, property lines. Every one of these structures serves the same fundamental purpose: to create enough distance between people that conflict either never ignites or, when it does, can be managed through institutional channels that remove the discomfort from the immediate social environment. The BaMbuti have none of this infrastructure. And their conflict resolution system is, by any measurable standard, more effective than anything the modern world has built. When conflict arises in a BaMbuti camp, and it does, with the same human regularity that it arises everywhere, the community does not separate the conflicting parties. It does not refer them to an authority. It does not build a wall between them. It sings. The Molimo, a sacred musical ceremony that anthropologist Colin Turnbull documented in extraordinary detail in his landmark work The Forest People, is not exclusively a religious ritual. It is a community recalibration system. When the social fabric of the camp becomes strained, through conflict, through grief, through the accumulated friction of close communal life, the Molimo is called. The community gathers. Music fills the forest. And something happens in that shared sonic space that individual conflict resolution cannot achieve. The identity of the community becomes louder than the identity of the conflict. The disputing individuals are not asked to resolve their differences. They are invited, through music, through collective presence, through the shared act of making sound together, to remember that they are, before they are anything else, part of something that neither of them created and neither of them can sustain alone. The conflict does not disappear. But its scale, relative to the community that contains it, becomes accurate. And that accuracy is what modern conflict resolution consistently fails to produce. Because modern conflict resolution happens between individuals, managed by institutions, in spaces designed for separation. It treats the conflict as the primary reality and the community as the context. The BaMbuti invert this completely. The community is the primary reality. The conflict is the temporary condition requiring reintegration, not resolution. And here is what makes this genuinely unsettling for anyone who has ever sat in a mediation session, filed a complaint with HR, or simply not spoken to a neighbor for 3 years over something neither of them fully remembers. It works better. But the Molimo is only one layer of what makes the BaMbuti model of community so extraordinary. Because once you move past the conflict resolution system, once you go deeper into the daily architecture of how this community actually functions, you begin to encounter something that modern social science is only now developing the vocabulary to describe. The BaMbuti practice what researchers now call radical interdependence. Not the polite, negotiated interdependence of modern communities, where people cooperate when it is convenient, contribute when it is recognized, and maintain the fundamental right to withdraw into private life whenever the demands of community feel too great. Radical interdependence. The kind where the boundary between what is mine and what is ours is so consistently and so genuinely blurred that the psychological energy spent managing that boundary simply does not exist. And what fills the space where that energy would have been is something that modern psychology has spent decades trying to produce through intervention. Unconditional belonging. Every member of a BaMbuti community, from the oldest elder to the most recently born child, operates within a social environment where their presence is not conditional. They do not need to perform. They do not need to produce. They do not need to maintain a certain standard of contribution before they are entitled to receive the community's care and attention. They belong because they exist. This is not sentimentality. It is structure. The food sharing system of the BaMbuti, documented in extraordinary detail by multiple anthropological studies, operates not on reciprocity but on presence. You receive because you are there. You contribute because you are able. The accounting between the two is never tracked, not because the community is naive about fairness, but because the community understands something that modern economic theory has consistently struggled to model. When belonging is unconditional, contribution becomes intrinsic. People do not contribute to the BaMbuti community because they fear the consequences of not contributing. They contribute because the community is so genuinely, so structurally theirs, that contributing to it is indistinguishable from taking care of themselves. The self and the community are not in tension. They are the same project. And here is where the research becomes genuinely revolutionary. Studies of BaMbuti children, conducted across multiple decades by researchers from both anthropological and developmental psychology backgrounds, consistently document something that developmental scientists consider almost anomalous by the standards of any other population studied. BaMbuti children show measurably lower cortisol levels, the primary biological marker of stress, than children in any industrialized society studied, including children in the wealthiest, most resource-rich environments that modern civilization has produced. The safest children, biologically, neurologically, measurably, are not the ones with the most material resources. They are the ones who are unconditionally held by the most people. This finding has implications that extend far beyond child development. Because cortisol responses established in childhood become the baseline stress architecture of adult life. The BaMbuti adult who grew up held by an entire community does not carry the neurological residue of conditional belonging, the constant, low-grade alertness to social threat that researchers now identify as one of the primary drivers of the chronic stress epidemic in industrialized populations. Their nervous systems were built in safety. And that safety was not produced by wealth, by security systems, by insurance policies, or by any of the other infrastructures modern civilization has built around the concept of protection. It was produced by people. Specifically, by the reliable, unconditional, structurally guaranteed presence of enough people who genuinely claimed each other. Here is the twist. And it does not arrive with drama or revelation. It arrives the way the most important truths always arrive, quietly, simply, and with the particular weight of something that was always obvious and somehow never seen. The BaMbuti did not build their community. They never lost it. And that distinction, so small in language, so enormous in implication, is the thing that changes everything. Every modern community-building effort begins from the same assumption that community is something you construct. Something you design, implement, fund, and maintain through deliberate institutional effort. Something that requires frameworks and facilitators and apps and initiatives and consultants who charge by the hour to help organizations manufacture the conditions for human connection. This assumption feels obvious. It feels practical. It feels like the responsible, evidence-based approach to a genuine social problem. But the BaMbuti reveal it as a symptom, not a solution. Because the reason modern communities need to be built is the same reason modern bridges need to be engineered. Something natural was removed, and now an artificial structure must replace the load it carried. We do not build bridges because building is the natural human response to crossing water. We build bridges because we paved over the shallow crossings, drained the stepping stone rivers, and created a gap so wide that only an engineered structure can span it. Modern community building is bridge engineering. It is the sophisticated, well-intentioned, genuinely necessary response to a gap that should never have been created. The BaMbuti never created the gap. They never separated the individual from the community as the foundational move of their social organization. They never built privacy as the highest social value. They never designed their physical environment to maximize separation. They never created economic systems that rewarded individual accumulation over collective sufficiency. They never told their children that growing up meant becoming independent, that maturity was measured by how little you needed other people. They simply never dismantled what human beings had spent hundreds of thousands of years building, the deep, structural, architecturally embedded togetherness that is not a feature of certain cultures but the baseline operating condition of the human animal. We are not a species that adapted to community. We are a species built from it. Every system in the human body, neurological, immunological, cardiovascular, endocrine, was calibrated over hundreds of thousands of years to function optimally inside genuine community. The loneliness epidemic is not a social problem with a social solution. It is a biological crisis, the result of removing a species from the conditions its body was designed to inhabit. The BaMbuti are not exceptional. They are uninterrupted. And what their existence demonstrates, with the quiet, undeniable authority of a community that has been working continuously for longer than agriculture has existed, is that human beings do not need to be taught how to build community. They need to stop being taught how to live without it. This is the thing that Colin Turnbull carried back from the Ituri forest. Not data. Not findings. Not a publishable framework for community design. But the lived, embodied, permanent knowledge that he had spent his entire life in a civilization that was solving a problem it had created, and that the solution was not more sophisticated problem solving. It was remembering what had never needed to be solved. So here is the question this entire journey leaves you with, and it is not comfortable, and it is not small. What would you have to give up, what privacy, what independence, what carefully maintained separateness, to have what the BaMbuti have? And is what you would give up actually worth what you are missing? Leave your answer in the comments. Share this with someone who has ever used the word community and felt the gap between what they said and what they meant. And if you want to keep encountering the intelligence that modern civilization forgot it already had, subscribe. Because the most important things were never lost. They were only stopped.